Hey everybody, welcome to Rink Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog. Make a play, Canada's choice for free casino games, sports odds, and poker strategies. Joining you from Scotiabank Arena, where the Toronto Maple Leafs defeat the Washington Capitals 5-1, joined alongside by Paul Hendrick. And Henny, this was quite the game. The first period was, maybe what you might expect from a rare, unusual Sunday afternoon game at Scotiabank Arena at 5:00. Just both teams kind of getting their feeling going, and both teams, I guess, feeling out the game. I don't really know how else to explain it. But then the Leafs exploding for 4 goals in the second period. But Henny, what did you make of these? And I know you've covered a lot of games in the past, but Sunday 5 p.m. I loved it because I loved having Saturday off. But with everything going on with football, a Sunday 5 p.m. game was certainly unusual.
It felt empty in the building. It felt empty watching it on television, Dave. It's something that, our friends and our producer here, Aaron Johnson out in Vancouver, they know all too well. I mean, when Toronto goes out there, the entire Pacific Northwest pisses and moans, with exception of our producer, Aaron. But everybody else does, because it's Big Brother Toronto dictating as to when the game starts, because the majority of Canadians live in central Canada. That said, I loved the 4:00 starts on a Saturday afternoon. You get out of there early enough. You've got the rest of the evening, either A, to travel, or B, go out and have dinner and just enjoy yourself and look at the mountains and the scenery that goes with going out to BC. In Toronto, though, it seems different. And there's an afternoon game that just resonates with me, going back to the 1999 Eastern Conference Finals, Game 1. Dominik Hasek is supposed to start. He doesn't start because of an injury. Cujo's in. Cujo was not quite at his best on that particular night, but the Leafs were absolutely flat. And I think that happens from time to time in those rare afternoon games in Toronto. Today had that feeling somewhat midway through the opening period before things settled down for good in the second. And all seemed well. The Leafs seemed good with it, but it is a different vibe. And I got to admit, I like it, but maybe I prefer the 7:00 starts. It's just what we've been used to here. Not the case if you're from Vancouver, and the 4:00 starts, depending on the Eastern opposition, will dictate that. And I think that's a good thing too.
Yeah, I'm thinking of that Sunday afternoon game that the Leafs had against the Bruins when they were up 3-2 in that series. Yes. I believe it was in 2019. So the Leafs had their first. That was the first time in a while they had a clinching game available on home ice. Up 3-2.
And Morgan Rielly. Yeah. Morgan scores on a power play to get the Leafs on board, if I remember, to get things started, and all felt good.
Well, certainly deja vu, because Morgan Rielly scored on a Sunday afternoon today, too. But we'll get to that. But first, let's hear from Sheldon Keefe, who described the pace of the game, and particularly how things changed in that first period where the Leafs found themselves down to what happened subsequently in that second period.
I mean, it took a while for our game to get going. First period was, a bit quiet for us. We didn't really get a whole lot happening with our game offensively. We got a few chances, but nothing sustained, and didn't play the way we wanted to. That we had to really get skating after that. They get a power play goal in the first period. That's the difference in the period. But I thought for us to really take over the game, we had to really get skating. So that was our message between periods, and I thought we really increased our pressure on the puck, and as a result, it's got a lot more territory, put them in some bad spots, and then our guys made good on their chances.
Yeah, that they had 40% of the high danger scoring chances in that first period, Henny, at 5-on-5, the Leafs did. And then it improved to 60% in that second period, and then 83.3%. Like, it really just kind of progressed as the game got older and older. And certainly this was it's kind of been the norm. The second period, with the exception of some games we've seen over the last month or so, has generally been Toronto's best period of the season. And when they explode for 4 the way that they did, first with Michael Bunting getting his 15th, Morgan Rielly getting his first of the season, William Nylander with his team-leading 28th, and then Pierre Engvall, who's found ways to score and be productive, already at 10 goals this season. So it really did kind of change everything from there. I mean, what do you attribute to this in that second period? What changes? Is it Is it just getting the game going, or is it just the messaging that the Leafs seem to need? Because it always seems like they either have a bad first period, a bad middle period, or something where they really need that message or something to kind of go after to kind of flip the script here.
Yeah, I think there's different things to look at. What really impressed me, Dave, was TJ Brodie getting back into the lineup and the reciprocal effect that it has on the entire lineup. And I thought he was so important in all of that, including that great second period. Beyond that, Bunting is such a spark plug. He's a firefly out there, and they get a goal on the power play to answer what Backstrom had done for Washington in the first on the PP. And then Morgan Rielly, of course, just piggybacking off that. And the emotional lift, I think that gave the team to see what he was able to do and finally score. William Nylander's just been doing it. He should go to the All-Star game. I know the format is flawed. He should be there. He's probably not going to be there if all holds true. And that's okay. Go have a great rest. And then Pierre Engvall's goal. Speed, size, and the ability to protect the puck, Dave. I think we're seeing indication of just how confident he can be in his ability, given his God-given skills and physical attributes. I think he could be a real factor come the postseason, given all I have mentioned. And that goal was spectacular. I mean, it really was spectacular. So all in all, just a damn fine second period. And for all practical purposes, the Capitals were out of the game at that point.
Yeah, nice little move from Engvall to kind of cut across, getting the Brodie feed, and then beating Darcy Kemper and kind of chasing Darcy Kemper out of the game at that point after 4 goals in, I think it was 13 minutes when I added it. Yeah, just a little under 13 minutes there. So just a quick spurt of goals from the Toronto Maple Leafs. And Engvall is certainly a stabilizer. And you mentioned TJ Brodie. It was his first game back in 10 games. After missing that last little bit with a rib injury, his second injury of the season, he talked candidly about how it's been a struggle for him mentally, not so much physically from the injuries, because he's used to just playing all the time. He hadn't really had much of an injury history, and then to have 2 that kind of kills the momentum of his season certainly does play and take a toll on a player of his caliber. And Sheldon Keefe after the game saying that TJ Brodie was, quote, solid, great to have him back. That's all he had to say. That's all he really had to say about what TJ Brodie brings in terms of solidifying the 3 defense pairs. That is the quote unquote optimal look that we've been talking about going into it. And that's not a knock on Connor Timmins, who's filled in okay for certain times, and same with Jordy Ben when they've needed that physical presence. There's Jordy Ben with Morgan Rielly. It's the shoe that fits. That's really what that defense pair is. And then you have your other defense pairs. You get Sandin back with Liljegren, you get Giordano with Hall, and there's that fit. But Morgan Rielly coming back here and getting his scoring touch. Remember, he came back in late December after missing a while with a knee injury. And you could tell that, for someone who's supposed to be an offensive defenseman, this was kind of gnawing at him a little bit. He wouldn't openly admit it, but you can tell. And it was kind of fun because yesterday at the Easter Seals skate, we talked to him afterwards, and he kind of was just kind of tongue-in-cheek kind of giving us a bit of the gear, saying that the kids were giving more hard-hitting questions than we were about asking him when he was going to finally score a goal this season. And so when we asked him what his response was, he said, tomorrow, of course. So you could just see it all over his face when he scored that goal. And here's his reaction after the game about just what he was feeling after he finally potted one in.
just relief, that's all. It felt good. Got some good karma yesterday from Easter Seals. So was out there with those guys a lot and smiling, and I think that's what it was.
You made good on your promise to them.
Yeah, and I wouldn't call it a promise. It was more of a hopeful guess, but that's about it.
Yeah, very humble, certainly in that he was in great spirits. Says that, and everything we asked him about after the game, he just kind of had similar answers. Said Ilya Samsonov gives great quotes after all the games that he's played, which is 100% true. If you've been listening to this podcast, that's 100% true. And also, John Tavares just talked about how great a teammate Morgan Rielly is. And when Rielly was asked about it, he kind of joked saying that, well, that's just John in his typical cliche mode for you. So I thought that was just, Morgan Rielly's certainly one of the class acts when talking after the game. And you could definitely tell he was in great spirits after finally getting one. And as I'm sure you've had the same kind of dealings with him as well.
Yeah, as an 18-year-old, Dave. And you think in the November of his draft year out in Moose Jaw, he runs knee first into a goalpost, tears his ACL. This is your draft year, and just how positive he remained in terms of surgery, rehabilitation, stayed out with the team. Of course, great parents in Andy and Shirley Rielly of West Vancouver, and right there with them all along the way. But just that perseverance and General Manager Brian Burke saying that had they had the first overall pick, regardless of the surgery, they would have taken Morgan Rielly first. I'm a big Morgan fan. He, like Luke Schenn, performing the near impossible, and that's making the National Hockey League as a defenseman, as a teenager. Both did it. And for Morgan, first goal since Game 7 of that series loss to Tampa, 47 games. So the monkey is off his back. And just back to TJ Brodie again, +2, 1 assist, 3 block shots, 21-15 of ice time to lead the Leafs, including team leading 4-13 shorthanded. So you bring him back. Of course, Morgan's going to get that goal. I mean, everything just fits well when the pieces that should be there are there. And we're not even talking about the reigning MVP of the National Hockey League in the lineup. I think they're going to be fine without Austin. But I think TJ Brodie and getting that blue line established, that despite the fact that Toronto went 12-2-1 without Morgan in the lineup, just talks about the balance that they've got. And it was a great graphic on TSN's game tonight. 358 man games lost to injury by the Maple Leafs, which leads the entire National Hockey League. Yet there they are, third team to get to 70 points this season. So fantastic on them. It's all about depth. It's all about balance. We can critique all we want, but this is a pretty good hockey club, and they're going to continue to work on well and try to get home ice advantage for that first round. Still lots of hockey to be played, but when Morgan's speaking as he did to you and the rest of the scrum, he sounds like he's in a good place physically and emotionally. That's good for the Leafs.
Speaking of man games lost, we got an update on Matt Murray's status. It looks like he will not be available to the Maple Leafs for the remainder of this little period of time that they've got before the break hits after Wednesday's game against the Boston Bruins. And then they'll have a clear indication as to how long they'll be without Murray. Of course, he sustained an ankle injury, we learned yesterday. That was the nature of why Murray, who was scheduled to start against the Ottawa Senators, did not. And with Rob Wong, we talked about it, Henny, about how bizarre the whole situation was, just because Sheldon said he was unable to play, but he remained on the bench. And that's kind of an odd look. You don't typically see that for a goalie who could be an option. If they're not an option, they're usually not on the bench. But I'll digress. Ilya Samsonov made his 6th consecutive start and 7th straight appearance for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And the Leafs had a very difficult game against the Ottawa Senators the other night. So this was one that they were looking to bounce back from. And Samsonov makes 23 out of 24 saves, .958 save percentage for the game. And certainly helps keep the team in it when it was kind of 50-50 in that opening period. And, Samsonov just talked about the increased workload that he's got and how the Leafs have been managing that, knowing that he's got to be the guy playing a lot of games in such a short period of time.
Yeah. Sometimes it's hard, but coaches just so support me, a little bit less skate, more like goalie eyes, or just maybe 15 minutes with the team. This really helped it for me, especially for just play game again. This really helped it for me. I feel good, but I'm skating game day all the time in the morning. I want to see a puck a little bit.
Yeah, it's certainly he does want to see the puck. Of course, yesterday the Leafs practiced with none of their NHL goalies. They had 3 practice goalies that they have kind of kicking around the arena. And so Samsonov did a little bit of physical activity, but was not on the ice with the team. And This is a goalie who's not used to this kind of workload. Of course, the Leafs call up Joseph Woll, who backed up his first appearance after a tremendous start with the Marlies this season, 12-1. I would like to see Joseph Woll get into some game if Matt Murray's injury ends up being long term. But Samsonov right now, great bounce back performance after, even though it wasn't his fault in that game against Ottawa, knowing that you got to kind of go right back in there just shows why he's really been the Leafs' top goaltender so far this season.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think emotionally, Dave, you go in now, you got to be professional about this. You got to be prepared to play every game. But I know it was Matt Murray's start and he's not expecting what happened to happen. And then you see a team in front of him that really didn't play all that well. A team that I thought lacked identity against Ottawa and got that identity back. The identity meaning Austin Matthews not there. And they just looked flat overall. And tip your hat to the Ottawa Senators. They played great and were deserving of the victory. They had a great weekend in back-to-back wins over Toronto and, of course, Montreal the next night. But for Samsonov, I think there's a comfort level right now knowing I think that the net is his. And he's played well. He's earned it. He's deserved it. Not only a bounce-back game from his performance against Ottawa, but a bounce-back game from his previous performance against Washington, where he gave up 5 goals. And this is the compete in Ilya. And you knew damn well that he was going to be back on track here tonight. Thought he made a bunch of great saves to keep his team in it, and good on him. No doubt he's starting against Boston on Wednesday. And eventually, Joseph Woll to get into a game. He's got NHL experience with the Leafs. I think those games, he was good enough to get wins when he started at the NHL level. But he's gone back to the American Hockey League level, has bounced back from injury and surgery, and rattled off 12 consecutive wins, 12-1 with that great Marley team right now. I think somewhere, somehow, given the schedule coming up, if Murray is to be out for an extended period of time, and I hope he isn't, that Joseph Woll is going to get an opportunity to get in and succeed. Sheldon Keefe will put him in that situation, and he's earned it.
Yeah, it was quite the year for Joseph Woll. Like last season, the end of last season, he sustained a shoulder injury, so he wasn't an option when the Leafs called up Källgren. And then they worked on the shoulder injury all through the offseason. Then he had a setback with his ankle injury that led to this long pause into this season as well. And you just wonder, right? Like you wonder, Källgren performed admirably, but you wonder if Woll would have got this opportunity earlier with the Maple Leafs had he not been hurt, because he played pretty well in the 4 games that he played with the Maple Leafs last season, including being the first ever goaltender to record a shutout at UBS Arena, because the Leafs were in that new building for the second game ever. The Flames were there the night before, and the Leafs won 3-0, and that was Joseph Woll's second NHL game. And certainly that was a big night for number 60 of your Toronto Maple Leafs. So that'll be interesting to see how the goalie situation kind of plays itself out here if Matt Murray is gone in a long term. You mentioned Austin Matthews. This was the second game that he's missed here as he deals with a knee injury that the Leafs have said would be a minimum of 3 weeks. They put him on IR today, along with other moves where they called up Woll on an emergency basis. Remember, everything's about fitting things in roster-wise. And so when they activated TJ Brody, they had to make a corresponding move, and the easy one to do is put Matthews on IR, not LTI. They will be very cautious about doing that. They won't do that unless they absolutely need to, because even though it's minimum 3 weeks, because of the break, it'll take longer to reach that 10-game threshold. So you don't want to do that if you don't have to, especially with someone like number 34. But the Leafs, with a big second period, they chased the defending Stanley Cup champion and Darcy Kemper out of the game. Charlie Lindgren comes back. That's the third all 3 contests that Charlie Lindgren's played against the Toronto Maple Leafs this season in the 3 meetings, but this one certainly wasn't planned. And Zach Aston-Reese in the third period, getting his 5th of the season. Nice little fourth line goal, something that was needed for not just Aston-Reese, but even Holmberg. Holmberg got that try on the second line, but then it didn't quite work against Ottawa, and so they flipped it back. They put Holmberg back on the fourth line. Reese Zach Aston-Reese came back for what was the second game after he got scratched. Bobby McMahon was sent down to the Marlies. And, I thought that fourth line with Wayne Simmons looked pretty good. I thought Wayne Simmons looked pretty good out there. He was throwing the body around, and he certainly doesn't look like a slouch when he's getting those opportunities to play.
No, he's an intelligent player, and he provides a bit of room and space emotionally and physically for everybody on the ice and on the bench. And I think there's a good chance we might see him in the game against Boston on Wednesday night before the All-Star break. Yeah, it was great. Joey Anderson missed a hell of a chance with that wide open net.
Yeah.
But it was good. The bottom six, I thought, really did contribute, Dave. And, a guy like Kampf as well, 11 of 15 on the draw for 73% and 4 shots. And you've mentioned a few of the other guys. I just thought the bottom six had a presence here today, complemented by obviously the obvious stars on the top six two groups. So it was a good team victory. And again, anchored by the return of one TJ Brody and just the impact he had, the domino effect throughout the entire lineup, starting with Morgan Rielly and onward, and the team fed off of that.
At 5-on-5, the line of Engvall, Kampf, and Anderson were 73% in the expected goals for share. Second best, the only to the Kerfoot, Yarncroke, William Nylander line. So pretty productive and a good look for a new third line that they tried there. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about John Tavares and his big night, game number 1,000 in his illustrious NHL career. That and more coming up on Rink Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog, Canada's home for casino games and sports odds, where everyone goes to play. This is Rink Wide Toronto, pregame, postgame, every game.
Do you want to get your business in front of a large, loyal, and engaged audience? Email info@gogoatsports.com to develop an exclusive and custom campaign for your business.
And we're back. You're listening to Rink Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog. From sports odds to free casino games, make a play at bodog.net. Time for the Bodog line of the day. And Henny, John Tavares playing in his 1,000th game. He's got 21 goals this season in what is his 51st game of the season just completed. Let's put the over or under at 35 goals this season. Do you think John Tavares will be over or under 35?
I'm going to say under, and I'm going to say 32 goals for John Tavares this year. I just think that's a good amount, and it's a tremendous season. Boy, oh boy, 35 goals. That'd be a pretty good end of the season. If they're able to get that from JT, the Leafs are going to be in good shape. But I'm going to go under, Dave, and I'm going to go with 32 goals for John when the season ends in mid-April.
I'm going to go over only because I don't know how long Austin Matthews is going to be out. I think the longer Matthews is out, that probably bodes well for John Tavares because he's going to have guys like Mitch Marner and Michael Bunting setting him up quite a bit. Even though he's going to be a distributor, I think he's going to be in position to score a lot of goals as well. And for that reason, with that, the kicked up ice time, all those other things, I think he could do it. But again, it's going to be dependent on how long Austin Matthews ends up being out, because as they stress, it is a minimum of 3 weeks. We actually don't know how long number 34 will be out of the lineup. Okay, so John Tavares getting a ceremony here. Nice little presentation here as they usually do. It's pretty much in the CBA at this point, Henny, that if you play 1,000 games, you get a silver stick. You get a commemorative crystal as well, which we saw. And your family and friends are all out. He said he had 60 to 70 family and friends on hand for this, which he believed at the time was the most he's ever had for a game. But John Tavares talking about some of the special moments that his team prepared for the beginning of the day and how much mom and pop play a role in shaping him to become the person that he is today.
Yeah, it's just awesome just to have my parents knowing, all the years of growing up and all the things they did and sacrificed, the hard work that they put in, just to give me the opportunity to play the game. And then obviously to see something there and put me in the right environments to excel and obviously get the opportunity going through junior hockey and getting to the NHL, and then obviously 1,000 games and everything they've done along the way there. And have my wife and my boys, all the sacrifices they make on a daily basis, do what I love to do and support that and make it really special. So to have them out there for sure was great, and obviously some great messages from important people along the way, teammates, close friends. So yeah, just a great night all around.
Yeah, a lot of Islanders teammates, a lot of other NHL teammates that he played with in junior as well. And then, of course, the video package wrapped up with his current teammates. And it was a nice little ceremony. They didn't make too big a deal about it. And I think that was probably by John's request, because he really does not like talking about himself too much. And it's just kind of not his way, but certainly was able to kind of take the emotion of what was today, put it aside, and then come back for 2 assists. If I remember correctly, Henny, I think he was the very first player that had exceptional status to play underage in Major Junior within the OHL, but I can't really remember that. I know he did have it, but
he did. Was Jason Spezza maybe before that?
I feel like they didn't have that rule yet when Spezza played.
Yeah.
Like I feel like the rule came after, and we'll confirm that.
Right.
But certainly that did set a trend. And look, we talked about. There's a lot of memories that a lot of people talk about with John Tavares, but my favorite one is actually before he was even here, when Brian Burke made no bones about how he wanted to have the number 1 pick so that he could pick John Tavares in the 2009 draft. And I remember I was a young Cub reporter. I actually is like a General City reporter covering for someone there. I remember thinking to myself, well, I mean, explaining your intentions and having the assets to do that is one thing, but you have to have a trade partner that's willing to do it. So I don't know how this is going to happen, but from there, it just seemed like the talk about John Tavares in Toronto was just always the case. And then, of course, when he became an unrestricted and free agent there in 2018, there was will he or won't he? And then he did. And, Henny, you've been around for a lot of Tavares' big moments on the Leaf beat on the road when I wasn't on the road. Maybe you could even tell us about that night in Long Island when he first came back, because that one looked pretty terrible on TV. I don't know what it was like in there.
Well, first of all, Toronto's playing on a back-to-back and absolutely exhausted. And then the emotional time it was, Islander fans tailgating at Nassau County Coliseum. We're staying in the Marriott Hotel across the parking lot, as you know.
I know it well.
Tailgating, it began at noon, and they were fired up, and they know us. We're doing the dead man walk to the arena from the hotel, and I hadn't seen anything like it since Darcy Tucker and the Leafs went back into Long Island following the hit in 2002 on Michael
Pekka hit.
But it was, the Pekka hit. But it was 10 times worse than that. And it was draining. But, when the Leafs lost, they just had nothing. The Islanders had come in off 3 days of rest. They were lying in wait. But a couple of weeks later, the Leafs go back into Long Island and beat the Islanders, and John Tavares scores the game-winning goal. That felt good. He's the first player in his draft class of 2009 in that draft to get to 1,000 games. Victor Hedman, who went 2nd overall, has played 943 games. Matt Duchene, who went 3rd overall, has played 952. Nazem Kadri came to the Leafs 7 overall. They had a trade partner that day. Brian Murray was going to take Nazem, and then as soon as Berkey heard that, they drafted Kadri. Nazem's played 789. 9th overall, player named Scott Glennie, outstanding junior with Brandon, played 1 NHL game. And I remember in the 2018 Calder Cup playoffs, he was playing, I forget for which team, but I'm on the GO train heading back toward Mississauga, and I'm sitting with his grandparents. Lo and behold, we get talking, and they were so proud of Scott, a tremendous hockey player. But it just puts into perspective what JT has accomplished, 1,000 games. And there's a player like Scott Glennie, tremendous hockey player, tremendous person, 1 NHL game to his credit, and he went 8 draft places later. The other thing I think of is John's mom driving him all over the place while, John's dad working a lot of hours all around the GTA to provide for the family. John got a lot of his ice time because he was best buddies with Dave Gagne's son, Sam Gagne. Dave ran a business where you put artificial ice in your backyard, so they had ice all the time. It didn't have to rely on cold weather. So John was always over at Sam Gagne's place playing hockey in the backyard. Rick Vive's son, Justin Vive, a part of that group as well. And they were part of that famous minor midget Toronto Marley team that didn't lose a game en route to winning the provincial championship. So he's just a good guy. I did OU AA football for Channel 11. His uncle played a year for the Laurier Golden Hawks. And Dave, the 1 year that John Tavares played for the Golden Hawks, he was a second-team All-Canadian, let alone one of the greatest lacrosse players who's ever lived. 1 year of CIAU football, as it was known back then. He's a second-team All-Canadian. So there's some great athletic genealogy in this Tavares family, but it starts with his mom and dad and how hard they work to provide the environment for their son to grow up in. And then John just utilizing that work ethic, and here he is, a point-per-game guy, 1,000 games in the NHL, and you can argue what you want about the contract when it was signed. That's what it costs to get a player of that ilk, especially at center. I don't think the Leafs would ever have changed their mind, and that might be a source of debate and argument because and how it maybe has hamstrung them in other areas. But you feel pretty good with John Tavares on your lineup and roster, especially heading into the postseason for a 7th straight season.
And they named him captain when it was very much up for debate, when they were actually awarding it and figuring out who they were going to give it to. Of course, they decided on John. And I did confirm it. He was the first player to be given exceptional status by the Canadian Hockey League as a 15-year-old. Yep. So there's that. It's interesting that how life kind of changes and who the Leafs have gone after, who they got and who they didn't get. Remember, they were heavily in the pursuit of Steven Stamkos the year before. And that didn't work out. But if it would have, then John Tavares would not be a Toronto Maple Leaf. Not to say that Stamkos wouldn't have been a great player for the Toronto Maple Leafs, but it could have changed the makeup for sure. But certainly, it was a big get when July 1st, 2018 hit and the Maple Leafs announced, or the insiders broke, or however you learned that John Tavares was going to become a Toronto Maple Leaf, much to the dismay of the New York Islanders fans that you've came across that season. I remember there was a local bagel place that was promising him bagels for life if he would have stayed on and signed with the New York Islanders. I remember seeing TV live hits outside of CAA, I think, or whatever the agency is that represents him, that were fielding meetings. Because remember, there were a few teams, but they limited to just a few teams that were allowed to talk to John Tavares, and or that at least he was entertaining. Like he purposely made the window small. But from his time with the Gens to all the stuff that you were talking about, to the NHL, Sam Gagne was one of the guys on that video board that you mentioned. So it certainly was a very interesting thing. And, we've been seeing a lot of 1,000-game players here. We got to see Wayne Simmons hit that mark last season. And, there's probably going to be like a few more in the years to come with guys like Mitch Marner, perhaps Austin Matthews and William Nylander. Of course, their contract status still TBA after a couple of years, but the future looks bright the way the Toronto Maple Leafs have it set up right now. They've just got to kind of keep it going here. But you mentioned the man games lost, and John Tavares has been around for all of them, and certainly has been a factor as well. Before we go, let's talk about the Boston Bruins here. They've lost 3 in a row. Now, this is going to be a very it's going to be interesting to see how they respond, because they have not had lost 2 in a row, and now they've lost 3 in a row. And they've got a Toronto Maple Leafs team that had beat them here in this building. So does that make it a tougher challenge for the Toronto Maple Leafs? Because that's going to be a very angry Boston team, much like they were when they lost their previous game before the meeting on the road at TD Garden.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I was flipping back and forth. Well, on my computer, I had the Bruin game, and of course, I'm watching the Leafs on the big screen here. They look tired tonight. Boston just looked tired, and this is against a Carolina hockey club that, plays in their face, limited time and space. And I think what Toronto has to do, I know there's no Austin, and that's not going to help. I'm just glad that TJ Brody's back, and I can't repeat that more in terms of emphasis. You've got to take away the neutral zone, and you've got to play the game that they played against Boston when they beat them here in Toronto 2-1, and that's take away time and space and play to win the game 2-1, and get a game like we got as well from Ilya Samsonov tonight in the victory against Washington. It's going to be tough, but the Leafs are one of the top 4 teams in the National Hockey League. Just consider this prep as they continue to look toward the postseason, which is still a few months away, but just pick up on that great home record. What are they, 24-4 now on home ice? Second only to the Boston Bruins, I think, as far as the Atlantic is concerned with home ice supremacy. I think they're more than capable of doing it, but they've just got to play a gritty game. And I'd like to see a repeat from the bottom 6 in terms of those bottom 2 lines to excel in a game against Boston. I think they're going to be very, very important.
It's been quite the wild ride for the Toronto Maple Leafs here, just kind of losing to Ottawa, bouncing back, figuring it out, and then playing a weird Sunday game, Saturday off. And then after Boston, there'll be a very lengthy break, and it'll be interesting to see how the Leafs kind of come back out from that. All right, for Paul Hendrick, I'm David Alter. You've been listening to Rink-Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog. From sports odds to free casino games, make a play at bodog.net. Rink-Wide Toronto, pregame, postgame, every game.
Hey, it's Ray Ferraro and Darren Drager from the Ray and Drakes Hockey Podcast. Drakes, we're getting into your favorite part of the year. It's insider season.
Yeah, the March 3rd trade deadline is in sight, and general managers' phones are ringing as front offices are trying to figure out what they're doing, buyers, sellers, and the storylines, Ray, and the trade rumors, they're blowing up now across the league.
Yeah, we got it all covered, Drakes, along with the top hockey guests, twice weekly, here on the Ray and Drakes Hockey Podcast. Check us out everywhere you get your podcasts.